Right, okay, yeah, thanks for the introduction. My name is Andrew Madge. So I've been asked to talk to you today about specifying glass for new windows. So my main business, it's a family business, Gowercroft Joinery. 26 years we've been running and I'm second generation. We actually manufacture all our products in the UK, a 25,000 square foot workshop, 65 employees. I'm quite proud to say that 11% of that workforce is in apprenticeships. A further 10 of those people are graduated apprentices. So we are trying to do our bit in terms of the skills shortage. And Alison very kindly introduced me earlier as the president of the British Woodworking Federation. And that's something that we're working really hard on in that arena as well. In terms of what we do, we focus on long-term relationships with people and we try and develop innovative products that solve a slightly different problem in the new window manufacture area. So as well as doing sort of double glazed, triple glazed windows for new builds, for renovation projects, we've sort of focused our business a lot around the heritage window market. A few examples of sort of projects that we've been featured in, and then we've also won a bunch of awards for heritage windows. So my other hat, I've got 3 hats, is running a business called Vacuum Glazing UK. So we got on board with vacuum glazing pretty early at Gowercroft, so we've been using that product for 10 years. And when we came across the LandVac product about 2019, we thought, this is it, we need to get involved in this, we need to make sure everybody knows about it. And hopefully I'll be able to explain why in a minute. But basically what we have here is a distribution network locally of companies who distribute that product. Okay, so replacing rather than refurbish. An emotive subject, no question. And I think everyone in the room prior to me has described quite well that this is a subjective thing and that we all have slightly different opinions. In terms of how we make a decision on how to develop our products, we sort of look at 3 different tenets. So the first one is that we strongly believe in maintaining the look and the feel of historically important buildings. So we're not advocating for ripping out Georgian windows, not at all. What we're typically working on, I'd say 99% of what we do is replacing sort of non-significant windows, ones that have been replaced after 1970, or doing extensions on existing listed properties. Why is that important? Obviously, cultural heritage and tourism, it's a big part of Britain, isn't it? The fact that we have these buildings and we should be preserving them. Also, there was a Historic England report that came out in March that found that actually having cultural heritage around us is good for the well-being of communities. Also, one of the key parts that we look at is reducing the environmental impact of the heritage buildings. So we want to produce products that help with that goal. Obviously, we've talked about the Historic England consultation going on at the moment. People have different opinions. I also have a few worries that it might be a thin end of a wedge, but hopefully not. And then the third one is delivering long-term solutions which minimize the on-costs for the occupants. So what we want to do is deliver a window that doesn't require constant maintenance, doesn't require the glass units being changed every 15 minutes. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but okay, so what about the glass? So I've had to make this a bit basic on the basis that I haven't got all day to talk about it, and I've had to make some sort of generalizations which may or may not be appreciated. So single glazing, obviously, having watched the presentations yesterday, I appreciate that some single glazing is a lot more expensive than others and a lot less available. But generally, we can probably all agree that the U value and the acoustic value are pretty poor. The embodied carbon's low and the lifespan's long. So in terms of existing heritage windows, obviously, originally, they would all have had single glazing. And this is sort of a typical detail that we see a lot. So you've got your 2 4mm pieces of glass coming into a glazing bar with the linseed oil putty fitting. As everybody's already alluded to, glazing bar widths do vary quite a lot in terms of historic windows, depending on period. But what we tend to see more often than not is people looking for glazing bars between 18 and 22 millimeters. I would say that's pretty much everything we do. So I'm going to focus on that as a width in terms of talking about some of the issues. So my opinion on single glazing is that you should not be using it in new windows unless it's a highly, highly significant building. For me, it doesn't meet the climate challenge that we're looking at. I'm going to combine double and triple glazing in together because I think they're similar. They have the same kind of problems in terms of heritage windows. Availability is good, costs pretty good, U value is pretty good, acoustic value is pretty good. All seems to tick the boxes until you try and put it into a pass-through glazing bar. So this detail is something that we see quite a lot where people have got this. So the minimum sightline that you can get in a double glazed unit typically that passes the regulations is about 8 millimeters. We're going to come back to that, but you can obviously see the sightline either side of that glazing bar. Other problems, double reflection from the street aspect. I know conservation officers hate that. You've also got, if you're putting the bonded bar inside the unit, and I've put an example here, it's actually one of our windows, so I'm not having to go at anybody else. But if you're looking at a good listed property, this is probably not appropriate. So I am willing to write off double and triple glazing in listed buildings. I might get controversial later, but I'm glad we all agree on that one. So slimline double glazed units. So like Nicola said, everyone's been talking about this. This is a hot topic. And what I would like to do is separate slimline double glazed unit from low sightline slimline double glazed units, because I think there is a difference there that we need to talk about. So you see that diagram again on the left, you've got your 8 mil sightline. So all glass units have to pass a standard, which is EN 1279, which Nick alluded to earlier in his presentation. So parts 2 and 3 of that deal with the moisture penetration and the gas retention. I am not aware of any double glazed unit with a sightline below 8 millimeters that passes that regulation, which is quite a significant problem, because what you get there is something that doesn't have a declaration of performance, which potentially can't be CE marked or UKCA marked, and may be illegal. The GGF released a report on this as far back as 2017, saying that they were going to strike off members that were still making these units. So what you see on the right-hand side is what most people are specifying, which in order to get that into an 18 mil glazing bar, people are reducing the sightline. So there I've got a 5 mil sightline, but I have seen them as small as 3 mil. Obviously the issue with that is that within that sightline, within that spacer bar, you've got all the desiccant and all the butyl. So if you're reducing the quantities of desiccant, the quantities of butyl, and there's any water around that, you're going to get a breakdown. And I know some people see a lot of breakdowns, some people don't. I have heard many stories about entire buildings needing every glass unit replaced after 12 months. So for me, slim double glazed units as a whole don't really tick the box, and low sightline slim double glazed units definitely a big no-no. And I don't think people are aware of this, even though it's been being talked about for 7 years now in the mainstream press. I think we still get probably 5-6 tenders on our desk every week where people are asking for low sightline double glazed units into 18 or 22 mil bars, and it's just not possible. You've also got a bit of an issue there in terms of the feather getting smaller too, because what people tend to do is reduce the size of this feather. I don't know if I can point this bit, which is the timber that runs through. And we don't really know what the potential risks are in terms of security or longevity that causes. But So I put a slide in last night, actually, about the importance of glazing techniques, because there are many different ways of glazing a double glazed unit, and this has quite a big impact on the slim double glazing performance. So you might get away with it for longer if you glaze it in a better way. I'd still say it's not fit for purpose, but on the left-hand side, you've got sort of external beading, which you see sometimes, where effectively somebody's fitted the glass from the outside and then they've pinned timber beads in. That is about the worst way of doing it, because if the water gets down the back of it, there's no way for the water to get out. It sits in that glazing rebate and it just boils the edge of the unit. This is slightly better. We saw a lot of this in like 2000s, which is a drained and vented external beaded system. So when the water runs down the face, it gets into that rebate and it comes out through that slot underneath. A bit difficult to see on there, but not particularly attractive in a heritage window, I would say. And then you've got the internal beaded systems, which have drainage in the glazing rebate, which I would say is the best way of glazing a unit. And you could probably, if you put a slim double glazed unit in there, you might expect 1 to 2 years. Maybe you get 5 in here, maybe you get 10 in there. You know, it can make quite a big difference. Interestingly enough, this is a photograph from the bedroom that I stayed in last night on site. So externally beaded, slim double glazed. I didn't have my tape measure, so I couldn't tell if it was a low sightline one, but there were 4 casements in there, 3 of which were blown. In this circumstance, obviously it's not helped very much by the fact that this is an oak window that's unfinished. So it's moved all over the place. There's nothing stopping the water getting behind, and it has just boiled that unit. So then we come to the final option, which in my opinion is the right option. Hopefully you'll agree after this, which is vacuum glazing. So availability, you know, at the moment, there's not many people doing it, so it's a little bit tricky to get hold of, and the price can be quite high. But the benefits in terms of U value, acoustic value, embodied carbon, and lifespan, you know, should outweigh that. Hopefully I'll prove that to you. So how does it work? So this is a cut through of a vacuum glazed unit. So effectively it's the same as a regular double glazed unit in that it's got 2 panes of 3 or 4 mil glass. The inner pane has the low emissivity coating, which stops the radiation of the heat. But then it's got a few fundamental differences. One being the thickness of the cavity, which is typically about 0.3. It does vary slightly, but it's normally about 0.3. The other point is around the edge seal. So rather than having a desiccant and butyl seal, these products have a mechanical seal of one form or another. So the one that we promote has a metallic seal, which is cold welded. The other one on the market that's been mentioned a few times has a glass frit seal. And then it has these tiny little micro pillars inside, which are always a big talking point, but they are required because the vacuum is trying to pull the 2 pieces of glass together, and you need something to hold it apart. Finally, the getter. So a getter is a highly reactive substance that sits inside that cavity. So if you get any air or moisture that passes into the unit for any reason, it reacts with that getter and gets taken out and maintains the integrity of the vacuum, which is why you don't see the reduction in performance over time. So why a vacuum? Why does a vacuum work? Well, heat and sound can't cross a vacuum in a conductive form. A vacuum's got the same properties regardless of whether it's 0.1 millimeters or the vastness of space. So it allows you to have that small cavity. It's got very low embodied energy and carbon compared to having to isolate the noble gases for a slim or a regular double glazed unit. I think somebody had data on that earlier, which was quite good. A vacuum's uniform and consistent. So I don't know if anyone's had double glazed windows where they've seen when it clears in the morning, it clears from the top down. And that's because the gas is sinking to the bottom. So you get better performance in the bottom compared to the top. In a vacuum, you don't get that. It's consistent across the whole piece. Not particularly relevant in this situation, apart from maybe your windows, Marianne, but the vacuum performs equally well in any kind of an incline. So a standard double glazed unit, if you put it horizontally, the performance halves, whereas a vacuum doesn't. So Lamvac's the product that I'm promoting over here. So it's got no discernible double reflection because it's only got a 0.3 mil cavity. It's a 0.4 centre pane U value, so incredibly low. 36 dB noise reduction. Really low cradle to gate body carbon. We saw a chart on that one earlier as well. Obviously that's based on it being sea freighted. It's 100% recyclable because it's just glass and a metallic strip. Maximum sizes, so you can get it actually up to about 4.2 by 2.5 meters, but the challenge becomes how you actually transport it. So we typically limit it about 2.5 by 1.5, which is plenty for most heritage projects. You can also get it down to 230 by 190. So if you wanted to do it in a small pane retrofit. Other options including ultra clear, so you could take away some of the hue of the low E coating because people tend not to like that. You can get solar control if you've got problems with solar gain, although I appreciate that's potentially an issue on a heritage building, laminate versions, etc. You get a 15-year warranty as standard. And we think actually the lifespan of this product will be huge. And obviously Finio are coming out saying that they are up, they're expecting 60 years. We'd expect ours to outlast Finio because of the technology of the edge seal. It just feels a little bit odd to me to come and stand here and tell you it's going to last forever when it's been on the market for 10 years. So the other point to mention is it's got an 8mm sightline, and that sightline increases to 13mm where you've got the getter, which is probably raising all sorts of flags in your head in terms of plant on bars. So you don't really want to be... So when you're looking at a new window application, you don't really want to be using this in small panes. This really wants to be used as big panes with a plant on bar. There was a chart earlier on that showed why that's the case. So the large panes obviously give a much better performance, and the thermal conductivity through the edge seal is quite high. So if you've got a number of small panes, then you reduce the benefit effectively. So conservation officers hate applied bars. And to be fair, for good reason, because we've all seen heritage buildings with bars falling off and it looks awful, and it should never happen. So what we do at our business is we create the grids using a halving joint, and then those grids are fixed into the sash prior to being sprayed externally. So they're mechanically fixed and glued. And you can actually pick them up and shake them by the grids and they won't come out. The internal grids are then formed with the glazing bars and pinned in place. So all of these bars are mechanically fixed into the sash. So although they're technically applied, they're also not technically applied. So we're trying to solve that problem for you because we appreciate it's an emotive one. These are the questions I get asked, by the way, these titles. What about the dots? Everybody asks about the dots. Everybody saw Pilkington Spacia, hated the plug, hated the little black dots inside it. So the technology's moved on quite a long way since then. So there's no plug on the face of this glass. We've also got about 8 times fewer of the micro pillars, or what we refer to as the dots. And that's 8 times fewer than Finio as well. And the micro pillars are using a semi-transparent material. So I'd urge you to go and have a look at it. It's quite difficult to see up here on the screen, but if you're standing and looking at it in a sensible manner, not 2 inches away with a white background, you can't really read those micro pillars anymore. What about the cost? It's really expensive. Well, yes, if you look at just the glass pane individually, but the way that we propose using it with the integrated plant on bars, compared to a slim double glazed option with the pass-through bars and putty, you might actually be seeing as much as a 25% reduction in the cost. And then when you start thinking about the on costs in terms of maintenance and replacement of glass, etc., it's pretty compelling. So you've got some of the U values and things here as well of these windows in terms of the assumptions. So just a quick promotion on Gowercroft. So we've got the first two windows that we made were the Winston, which is a sliding sash, and the Richmond, which was a casement. And they were designed around Pilkington Spacia back in 2014 and then developed into the Landvac later on. So those two windows in a standard industry-sized format, the sliding sash achieves a 1.12 U value, whole window U value, and the casement's 1.18. So it's all within modern building regulations in terms of performance. As a business, we offer a 10-year no maintenance warranty. So there's no small print. You know, if you've got an issue, we come sort it. And I know Accoya got a lot of bad press yesterday, but I'm a massive advocate for Accoya because, yes, if people do their maintenance correctly, you don't need it, but people don't. And if your window cleaner comes and bangs off some of your paint and leaves it for 50 years, that window's still going to be okay to be repaired. You know, quick coating, it'll be okay. So I'm a big advocate for that in terms of the longevity of these products in a heritage application, which I think is really important. So we tried to replicate heritage detailing, obviously, in a slightly mass-produced product, which hopefully you'll appreciate. Flexibility on colours, ironmongery choices, etc. So replacement over refurbishment, I imagine this will be a bit of an emotive one as well. But what we've done is we've taken the English Heritage Study, which I think Bill mentioned earlier, looking at the U value and the air leakage performance of different options. And then we've applied our window at the bottom. And then we've tried to extrapolate that into a 50-year service life. So looking at what would be the maintenance requirements over that time, repainting, energy usage of one compared to the other, to try and get an idea of what that costs by not changing that window, and compared to some of the other options on the table. And then also the carbon footprint of that. Now, I imagine some people want to look through those figures, so I'm happy to send them around rather than talk about them now. But yeah, the other thing is that it's done with an ambient indoor temperature, so we're not allowing for just wearing a jumper and keeping the temperature down, but that would definitely help. EPDs, so somebody mentioned life cycle assessments earlier, and we're a big fan of that because we should be looking at these products in terms of their whole lifespan and what the carbon impact of that is. So we have worked with the University of Derby to develop EPDs, so full life cycle assessments for all of our windows and doors, including the heritage ones. So you can see you get pretty big benefits over the whole life where you're including the improvements in terms of the energy efficiency, but also pretty small impacts initially in terms of the manufacture. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of examples of what we've done with vacuum glazing. So although it's still a relatively new product, we are seeing an awful lot of demand for it. So as Gowercroft, we've probably done 25 grade 2 listed properties with that window in the last sort of 4 years. We've also had it approved in a grade 1 listed property. Now, as you'll appreciate, that's replacing non-sympathetic replacements, as it should be, and also a grade 2 listed property. So we are starting to see it get accepted into these buildings. We also, through the Vacuum Glazing UK network, we're seeing some fairly significant projects on that side in terms of reglazing. So we've had it approved and specified for widespread reglazing, a grade 2 listed estate in London, a few prestigious universities, and Selector Glaze, who are sat in the third row over here, have recently had it approved at the Imperial War Museum in Duxford for refurbishing existing windows. It's also getting widely mentioned now in retrofit publications. So this is the first project that we ever did with Pilkington Spacia. So this is 10 years ago. So this is Winston Churchill's old house on the edge of Richmond Park. And yeah, they also filmed the Compare the Meerkat adverts in that room behind that Palladian window. So this is a recent one that we did during COVID. So this is Estelle Manor. So it used to be at Eynsham Hall in Oxfordshire. So we haven't done the front elevation of this. This is what I'm talking about. So it's an extension in the back, but a very significant hotel extension. And they actually didn't have to have the product, but because it passes building regs, they were able to put it in anyway because they wanted something that looked more traditional. And then many others up and down the country. So all sorts of different weird and wonderful places, which hopefully we've improved. So how can you find out more? So all our products for Gowercroft and for vacuum glazing are on MBS. If there's architects and councils, I'm guessing you're using that platform. So you can see all the EPDs, you can see the BIMs, the Revit documents, etc. And if you're not on NBS, give me a call. Thanks very much.